AI is transforming hiring, but not necessarily in the way you might think. Instead of automating people out of the process, Brett Waikart and his team at Skillfully are using AI to make hiring more human, fair, and skills-based. They create realistic AI-powered job simulations, and Skillfully helps employers hire faster and smarter. We talk about the changes, what it means, how AI can drive a skills-first future, and what it takes to make those changes on this bonus episode of The Business of Tech. This episode is supported by Syncro. Syncro, the integrated remote monitoring and management and professional services automation platform, is designed for mid-sized and growing managed service providers. Its latest innovations include an AI-powered smart ticket management system with automatic ticket classifications, guided resolution steps using pre-approved scripts, and a natural language smart search function. These tools streamline ticket handling and improve response times. Discover more at syncromsp.com. Well, Brett, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Dave. Excited to be here.
Well, I'm excited to have you because you're kind of in an interesting space of kind of that collision of hiring and AI. Give me a little bit of sense of what Skillfully does.
Absolutely. Yeah, this is an interesting time to be building a company, especially in the employment space. What Skillfully does is we use AI to help employers hire for exactly the skills they need. The biggest problem right now in the world of employment is that AI has fundamentally changed the rules of employment, the rules of getting a job. Every single job seeker in the world has adopted these generative AI tools, these large language models. If you are an employer and you receive an application, you can safely assume that 90% or more of those applications have either been augmented or wholesale rewritten by some of these AI tools. Adoption of ChatGPT and Claude and Gemini by the job seekers of the world have meant that there are now between 10 and 15 times the amount of applications being submitted every single week, every single month. These tools are just letting applicants submit many more applications to these job opportunities. And so what that means for employers is that they need a new set of tools to filter all of that inbound. The real problem is that when you use an AI tool like a ChatGPT to rewrite your resume or to write your application material for a job, what those tools are going to do is they're going to pull information from the job description that somebody might be applying to, and they're going to use that to rewrite that resume, rewrite that application. So the application that gets submitted, it's going to be perfectly keyword matched to that job description. It's going to be Shakespearean prose about why this is the only job that applicant has ever wanted. But the dirty little secret is that these tools allow applicants to do this dozens, hundreds, thousands of times in a given month. And so employers are really struggling to be able to see past that resume, see past that application, to understand that the person applying for a job actually has the skills that they're describing in those materials. So what Skillfully does differently is instead of focusing on the resume, we use AI to create very realistic simulations of the job to be done, of the job that somebody might be applying to. So if you're applying to a job that Skillfully supports, instead of being asked to just describe your skills and your abilities like you would in a regular resume and application, what we do is we actually ask you to demonstrate those skills. We ask you to spend 10, 15 minutes not rewriting your resume or writing a cover letter, but spend those 10 or 15 minutes in our platform, in our simulations, actually doing the work, showing the skills that are needed for that job. So it changes the job seeking, the application experience for that job seeker, for the candidate. For employers, though, it really cuts through the noise. It cuts through that huge increase in applicant volume and lets employers immediately see, oh, well, of the 1,000 people who applied to this job last night, here are the 10 or the 20 who have the specific skills for the job. That's going to be who I focus on. That's going to be who I then speak with, schedule an interview with, and kind of move them further through the process. The end result for an employer it's usually about a 70% reduction in the cost to hire, just really driven by that time savings. And it's usually about a 50% shorter hiring cycle time, just because we're able to automate that top of the funnel and automate that skill validation so that every minute you're spending with candidates for the job, you know you're spending that time with applicants who have exactly the skills you're looking for. That's what we do.
Give me an example of how this works, like practically, like a particular job description and how it would work in practice.
Yeah, we work with a ton of different sales organizations. For example, sales organizations, they hire a tremendous amount of people: SDRs, BDRs, account executives, all the way up to sales managers, CROs. There's usually huge customer service and customer support teams. Well, the skills that are relevant for those kind of jobs are very much interpersonal. They're very much how can you conduct a customer discovery conversation? How can you do market sizing? How can you handle a customer objection? These are the skills that really dictate success in a particular role. The problem is it's really hard to get an understanding of somebody's proficiency level with those skills just by looking at their resume or by looking at their LinkedIn profile. What you really need to start seeing are those skills in action. And so that's exactly what we give recruiters, give employers the chance to see. We will have applicants who go through sets of simulations that can be customized to exactly the service or the product that a particular employer may be selling as their core product. And we can literally observe how these salespeople would behave in common sales scenarios, how they navigate objections, how they run discovery conversations, how they close a negotiation. And in just 15, 20 minutes of time, of a candidate's time on our platform, we get a very textured, very precise picture of exactly the skills that they have mastery over in that moment. In a lot of ways, it allows employers to basically sometimes even skip the resume review, look directly at how somebody does in a particular job, and then use that data as the basis for who they move forward in the process.
Now, I was kind of interested to understand how it works from a applicant perspective, and in particular, you work closely with a lot of institutions like SUNY and Montclair State to help prep students. Like, talk to me about how you're prepping candidates to be effective on this kind of platform.
Yeah. Our primary business model is working with employers. That is where 90% of our effort in a given day is focused. And so we're working with dozens and hundreds of different employers to be able to build these very customized, very realistic simulations of how work is done in any of these different roles. But you're exactly right. What we've realized about maybe a year ago is that is an incredibly valuable set of experiences. That's an incredibly powerful sandbox to be able to make accessible for students who are just preparing for their career. We can give them a hands-on experiential taste of what all of these different jobs require, the skills that they need, what it looks and feels like to actually be in that job. So if you're a student at a university that partners with Skillfully, what we can do is take all of those simulations that we've built and make that catalog available and accessible to students who maybe find us through their career service center. They may find us as a teaching aid in some of their courses, but a Skillfully simulation for a student is basically an audition for this job before they ever get into an interview, before they ever sit across the table from somebody who might judge them if they don't have those skills perfectly polished. Well, we can create this virtual sandbox for that student to be able to practice and to demonstrate that proficiency with the skills so that when they get into the interview or they actually start the job, they're doing work that they're already familiar with. They have a track record of success doing exactly the task required for a particular job. And so that's hugely helpful. One thing that we think about a lot is the skills feedback loop between employers in the workforce and universities. And the historic difficulty has always been that university curriculums refresh at a rate that can be measured in decades. Meanwhile, in the workforce, especially now since the introduction of AI tooling, the skills that are required by particular employers, it can change monthly, it can change weekly. And so what we're doing is creating a better feedback loop where students can see in real time how skills are being used, how they need to be used in the workforce in any of the jobs that they might be interested in.
Well, I was interested in starting with that student experience because, of course, that gives us a little bit of insight into the way the process works. But I'm
Correct.
also interested in understanding a little bit about how employers are measuring it. You've talked about things like, significantly higher candidate conversion,
Yeah.
the cost time savings. Like, how are you tracking that through the process?
For any employer who's looking at their hiring efficiency, the good employers who are really tracking this are tracking cost to hire, but cost to hire as a function of how much time goes into that process of reviewing applications, reviewing resumes, selecting applicants to move through that process, validating skills, finding company and culture match. A true cost to hire metric is going to include not just the cost, the hard cost of maybe software tools or your ATS system. It's also going to include the 5, the 6, the 10 hours of team time that have been spent reviewing applications or sitting in interviews. For a typical Fortune 500 employer, what we're seeing is applicant numbers where if they post an opportunity on their careers portal, they're going to be getting between 1,000 and 5,000 applications within the first 24 hours. That is a massive amount of volume to have to weed through, and that takes a lot of time if you don't have the right tool for the job. So the way that employers are measuring their efficiency is basically that cycle time from the moment they open a rec to the moment they have somebody's butt in the seat doing the actual job. How much time and money was spent to get from point A to point B to finish that full cycle. But this is really where there's quite a lot of difficulty, because when you dramatically increase the volume of applicants coming into the job, well, then you have to obviously spend just as much time if you are manually reviewing those resumes, reviewing those applicants. That doesn't really scale if you're using traditional tooling. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to give employers new levers to be able to increase that cost or decrease that cost to hire metric, to improve that metric. By getting candidates to lead with demonstrations of skill as opposed to descriptions of skill.
Now, I'm curious to think about it in the sense of there's so many AI generated resumes out there. Like, are simulations alone enough to counteract those credibility issues in hiring, or are there other best practices that you find that it pairs well with that makes the process most efficient?
What we're finding is that the most successful employers split their hiring process between what you could think of as skills and an applicant's will. So skill and will. And skills are a really interesting part of the recruitment process because tools exist today, like Skillfully, but tools exist to automate that validation of applicant skills. That's a super important kind of answer for the most important question of the time. All of these AI generated resumes, everybody's representing that they have the skills for the job, but they're not always being genuine. They're not always being perfectly authentic in terms of representing their own ability. So automating that is a huge piece. AI, though, is not meant to replace the human in the entire process. That will component of evaluating an applicant, this is when you start evaluating their motivation to do the job, the values alignment, the culture alignment with the team. Those are elements of the recruitment process that really shouldn't be taken out of the hands of recruiters. Folks who started a career, started a job in HR, in recruiting, they did that because they are especially good at building those relationships with applicants and to be able to discern the character and the ability of that person, their potential in their workforce if they were to join the company. That shouldn't be replaced. The ones that are doing the recruitment process the best, the employers that are having the greatest success, they're segmenting those two categories of an applicant's employability. They're seeking out the best tools to automate that skill validation piece. the tools that are the best fit for the skills required for the job, whether that's engineering or sales or staffing, whatever it may be. But then they also have a very structured process that emphasizes the importance of the human recruiter, the human interviewer, in that second piece, the will component of the evaluation process. That's where we're finding employers making the best, having the best results, making the best progress, and just navigating the challenges of the current application or the current employment landscape.
Gotcha. Now, I have to ask, because I've got a highly technical audience. Give me a
Sure.
little bit of a sense of what skillfully means when you're using AI, because it can mean,
Great
can mean a
question.
lot of different things, right? Tell me what your definition and where you're applying AI and what it means at the Skillfully product.
Wonderful question. There's maybe two sides of the coin in terms of our technical implementation. It's how we generate and how we deliver those simulations, and then how we evaluate the skills that are demonstrated in those simulations. What makes Skillfully really unique as a company right now is that we've developed infrastructure that allows us to treat large language models as if they're individual Lego bricks. And so when we create a simulation of a particular workflow or a particular job, what our back end allows us to do is to take multiple dozens, sometimes up to 100 different large language models and combine them and stack them like we're building a castle out of Legos. Every single large language model, every little model has its own objective function. Our infrastructure is orchestrating all of those models so that the user experience, the job seeker, the applicant experience is one of a seamless, hyper-realistic scenario that they might encounter in the job. Our product goal is to have our simulations and time spent on the job be a one-to-one match. We want to have that feel as realistic as possible. So that infrastructure that allows us to treat LLMs as Legos and orchestrate them is really what allows us to create and to provision those simulations. Now, the most important piece is to actually evaluate how somebody is performing, the proficiency level they're able to demonstrate in the simulations. And so what we're doing is, as somebody is going through a given simulation, we have an evaluation engine that's also AI driven, but what it's doing is constantly comparing the demonstrated behavior of somebody in the simulation, how they're going through a scenario, how they're navigating an interaction, how they're completing a particular task. And we're comparing that to a skill rubric, a skill taxonomy in the background. And so we are hoovering up a tremendous amount of data about how somebody is approaching a challenge, how they're navigating through it, the degree of success they have at the end. And we're comparing that to a fixed rubric. That means that if we have 10,000 applicants go through a set of simulations, every single one of those 10,000 applicants is going to be compared against exactly the same standardized rubric of skill proficiency. What it means is that for an employer, once we have these simulations stood up, on a per applicant basis, our system will return a skill by skill proficiency score, a quantitative empirical number that rates the level of demonstrated proficiency that that applicant was able to show through the course of the simulations. That is incredibly powerful at scale, because it allows you, especially if you are a global organization that you have maybe multiple offices across multiple countries, well, you still want to make sure that every applicant is being measured against that same rubric. The way that we've structured that evaluation engine really enables that and really drives a ton of value for our more multinational global hiring platforms that have been leveraging Skillfully really successfully.
Gotcha. Well, as we wrap up our time together, I want to get a little bit of a future sense from you, because it sounds like you're a guy who's spending a lot of time looking at the various LLMs too, because you're employing lots of different ones. If you're using them as Lego bricks, you have to know all of the different colors and how they assemble. What are you kind of keeping an eye on over the next 6 to 12 months in that space? Like, what are the trends you're watching for, or what are you kind of hoping might happen?
We have been very focused for the last 12 months on developing simulations that are fully multimodal. That has been the big focus thus far. As your audience will know, these models are not just chat bots. They also enable verbal voice modalities, video modalities. Essentially, all of the different colors of those Lego bricks just mean that we can recreate a wider and wider set of workplace scenarios and challenges. That's been the focus for the last 12 months. For the next 12, what we're starting to see, and we're spending a lot more time in, our simulations have always been very focused on understanding somebody's their professional skill set. Well, that professional skill set has evolved a ton in the last 12 months in terms of what employers are really looking for. If somebody's hiring a marketing lead or if somebody's hiring a project manager, they're not just assessing the traditional skills for somebody maybe writing a marketing brief or creating a project plan. They also want to know, well, how well can this person use AI in the performance of that job? So we're actually now developing simulations, developing a capability that allows us not just to assess an applicant's skills, but also assess their ability to use AI tools in the service of those skills, to be able to strengthen those abilities and be not just a really high performing marketing executive, but a 10x marketing executive or a 10x project manager. And we're seeing employers use these simulations more and more as not just a tool to assess applicants, but then to upskill them and get them ready to really hit the ground running and be as productive as possible by bringing that skill set, amplifying that with the correct use of AI, so that when they're in the seat, they're doing the job, they're going to be as successful as possible, and they're going to be staying in that role. They're going to be retained for as long as possible. So that's leading us to do a lot of really cool things. We're partnered with Anthropic specifically, but we can do this across all different models. I think Skillfully as a platform to enable that next generation of job seeker to not just get the job of their dreams, the job that they have the right skills for, but to be as successful as possible in that job. That's kind of the next frontier that we're moving towards.
Brett Waikart is the co-founder and CEO of Skillfully, a public benefit corporation using AI to enable skills-based hiring through immersive, interactive job simulations. A Haas MBA alum, he previously led a workforce development nonprofit focused on financial literacy. Brett, if people are interested in learning more, what's the best way to reach out and get in touch?
I respond to all of my DMs on LinkedIn. My email is usually pretty easy to find, but reach out to me on LinkedIn. Our company page and my personal page, that's the best place to see all the updates, the latest and greatest for Skillfully. And go Bears. Thanks for the shout out there.
Thanks for joining me today.
No problem, David. Thank you for your time. See ya.
The Business of Tech is written and produced by me, Dave Sobel, under ethics guidelines posted at businessof.tech. If you've enjoyed the show, make sure you've subscribed or followed on your favorite platform. It's free and helps directly. Give us a review too. If you want to support the show, visit patreon.com/MSP Radio and you'll get access to content early. Or buy our Why Do We Care merch at businessof.tech. Have a question you want answered? We take listener questions, send them in, ideally as a voice memo or video to question@mspradio.com. I answer listener questions live on our Wednesday live show on YouTube and LinkedIn. If you've got a comment or a thought on a story, put it in the comments if you're on YouTube, or reach out on LinkedIn if you're listening to the podcast. And if you want to advertise on the show, visit mspradio.com/engage. Once again, thanks for listening, and I will talk to you again on our next episode.
Part of the MSP Radio Network.